Well, hello and welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is James Timmons, and I'm going to be instructing you through today's session. You should be able to hear my voice, and you also should be able to see my screen at this time. If you have any problems with either one of those, please feel free to dial the support number at 877-582-7011. Hello there. Guys, today we're going to do something today that I've been longing to do for quite a while, and that's do a class on advanced digitizing. Today we're going to talk about advanced digitizing, what that means, and how we go about creating a design that may look simple, but on hindsight is very difficult to do. That's going to take us to our project for today. And as I navigate here, I'm going to click on our little project, this guy. This is going to be our project for today. When we talk about advanced digitizing requires skill set, most of all, knowledge of what to do, when to do it. Experience is what that entails basically. And that's going to be the huge difference between someone who is just starting out versus someone who's been doing it for some time actually. And looking at graphics and adhering to, this looks pretty simple. I could be able to digitize this really simple, but it depends on what the layout is of the design. It depends on where it's going to stitch. Bigger is always better if you can make it larger. And what really counts though is if you can look at something and determine how it's going to stitch out. I've been doing this for so long that when I look at a graphic, I can literally hear the embroidery machine stitching in the background, and I can see the design stitching in my head just because I didn't start doing this last week. I'm at year 40 now. So, and it's just doing things over and over again, making mistakes and things like that and learning from your mistakes. And you pick up things. And today we're going to talk about all that in 1 hour. Here we have our design. This design that we're looking at here looks, the artwork, it's not the best artwork. It is vector artwork because as I look, and whenever we talk about graphics, the best type of graphic that you can digitize from is always going to be a vector or a camera-ready piece of artwork. It's going to work better for you because you can see things a lot clearer, and it's just going to make it easier for you when you go in and you digitize something like that versus a terrible bitmap file coming from the web, which is usually 72 DPI, which is terrible. But something like this, we always talk about size. Size determines pretty much everything in embroidery. You can look at something and you can determine, is it going to be a problem? Is it not going to be a problem? For something like this guy here, I'm going to select this. Once I select this, I can see the size of the design. I'm going to navigate down here. And here it tells me that this design is about 6 inches tall. This is wonderful, isn't it? 6 inches tall. Because it's 6 inches tall, that's a pretty nice size. So I'm realizing now that I can use larger stitch types to go in and fill these particular areas in, right? Wrong. This design is not the finished size of the embroidery that we're going to be working on today. I'm going to slide this over. This is the finished size of the design that we're going to work on today. This, my friends, is 1.7 inches tall. And where is this going to stitch? This is going to stitch on a visor. Aren't you loving this already? So what happens is, looking at a design, large basically, and then you're looking at what the actual finished size is going to actually be, and it's going to stitch on a visor, that would really scare a lot of people, and this would be their nightmare on embroidery street, literally. But today we're going to show you how to go in and break down this particular design. And what I want you to think about here also, being an artist does help tremendously with being able to digitize and being creative and things like that. But you also have to be technical also. You could be a technical digitizer also and achieve some great heights as well. Looking at this design here, and if I press my number 1 key here on my keypad, pressing the number 1 key on the keypad allows you to see the image as 1-to-1. the actual finished size of the embroidery. And you can see the differences here between these two design sizes here, which this guy here, again, jacket back size here, a full front, nice, but not today. This is the one that we want to look at today, actually. Look at and notice the widths of the columns here, 1-to-1, because this is going to be valuable. I have a question here. Did I draw this? This original one here, no, I did not design this one, but I am going to show you something here in a second that I did do, and it's just to simplify this graphic. Because right now, this design here, this is going to go on a visor. Right now, looking at the detail in this design here, something's going to have to give, right? Because I can't go in, and if I were to measure, let me navigate up top here. I'm going to change my measurement system here momentarily, and I'm going to go to View. I'm going to choose Measure. Let's measure the width of this little arm here, 1.5 millimeters. It's okay, small lettering, but for this visor, I'm going to have to go bigger with this. So some areas of the design and understanding and knowing when to do what is when the experience comes in, and that's what makes you different than an average digitizer. Now, I referenced that I did not draw this design. This was something that I actually grabbed from the web. I am going to show you now, which is hidden on the page, what I did go in and do a quick sketch of. This guy. See that? Looking at this design, looking at the graphic here, and looking at the new, and this is just something here that I quick sketch of this actually. In the old days, when I was a cartoonist, we used to have to draft the designs out in order to get them to work, right? So for something like this, and again, for this particular image here, this is what I did, okay? I took this design, I had a sheet of tracing paper, and I went to a window and I taped it to the window, and I did a rough sketch of this guy to scan in to digitize from. That's what I did with this one. This is an advanced digitizing class. So the things that we talk about today are going to be above and beyond in digitizing a design, okay? So here is the original. This is what I'm going to have to do in order to get this to work on a visor, or else I'm going to have major issues here. Thread breaks, needle breaks, and here, and I don't want this to end up to be a nightmare on Embroidery Street. So therefore, I have to go in, and this is what separates a great digitizer from an average digitizer. And again, being an artist, it definitely helps out immensely when you're dealing with things like this. So as you're looking at this, and right now with this, just showing you this, and I'm gonna, when I send you the video for this, you're gonna have this also, because how you have to think when you're looking at graphics, especially something that's really tiny, that you gotta go in and digitize, because you know you can't put all this detail in this design to stitch on that visor, or you're gonna have a major headache on your hands. So simplification of the graphic is necessary in order to get things to work. Again, once it stitches out, you will hardly know any difference once it stitches out. We just have to go in and prepare this design for digitization and having this to work. So having said that, here we have our design. And right now I'm looking at this. What do you see here when you look at this design? What do you see when you look at this? You know you're going to have to digitize this. What do you see up front? Because what you see is very important, because what you see, you're going to be able to go in and digitize that. What do you see here? What is off about this design? Let's not all answer at once. All right. Teeth. Yeah, teeth are definitely going to have to be adjusted. And from this, you know, from my design here, basically, I wasn't so interested in the colors, because I know that when I go in and digitize it, I'm going to fill those areas in with an outline stitch. What about the tail, guys? That tail look a little strange. Shouldn't it look like this? I'm going to go into my drawing tool here, and I'm going to scroll down here also, and I'm going to choose my vector drawing. And shouldn't the tail look like this? If you're looking at, shouldn't it look like that? So when you look at, it's always those little things that always come back to bite you. And looking at this now, so I'm kind of going in, and what I'm also thinking about here also, I'm thinking about this here also. This is his back, so maybe he should have something, you know, it looks like that in his back also. Again, this is just the artwork here that I'm just kind of sketching on here. So this is the middle of his back. So something like this. So there's always little things. And when you look at designs, whenever you go in, you always think about what it looks like in real life. And when you decide that, what it looks like in real life, things start making sense. And then you would actually have to digitize that way also. And then it comes to the three areas that we work on here also: the background, the middle ground, and the foreground. So we have these things also that are taking place here as well at the same time. There's a lot of things going on at once here, okay? And as we continue to break this down, so now we know that we've got the tail here in place. As I'm looking at this now, I'm looking at what am I going to digitize first with this? And I'm going to have to go from the background to the foreground. When I layer it, that's going to give me the sense of a 3D look, appearance once this thing is stitched out. And so that's the main thing that I want to choose from this, because I'm looking at this with the end in mind. Right now, I'm looking at this, so I'm looking at the teeth area here. Boy, he just see a dentist, doesn't he? So here with this, as I'm looking at this here, you have the teeth, and that's going to be behind top of the mouth here in this lip area here. That has to be in the background somewhere. Everything you see here, the ears here, this one's kind of in the background. This one's kind of in the middle ground here. You have his hair up top here like this, and you have this eyebrow looking thing here, and you have his eyes that are going to be on top of this as well. Then you have the nose. So these are areas here that I need to look at here. And what I'm also thinking about too, I want to keep the needle on the fabric as long as possible. You hear me say that over and over and over again because it matters. Keeping the needle on the fabric as long as possible. Can I in fact go in and digitize this hand and go in and perhaps digitize these feet here on the bottom and do it in one shot? And then maybe go up top here and do the ear. You're making decisions here based on how you want your embroidery machine to run, is in fact what you're doing here. Notice these areas here, simplification of the teeth. Look at this one. So this is what I'm looking at now with the graphic. And this is what the embroidery should look more like when you look at the finished piece, because it's so tiny. Here we have the hands here. So as I'm looking at this, you get satin stitch here for this one, got the arm here for this one. So what I'm looking at here is I want to do the head last, and I'll go in and do everything else first. The feet here also, when I look at the feet, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on my color number 1. What type of stitch to use for this? These areas here are so tiny that I can't use satin stitches for this areas here. So I'm going to have to go in and use a running stitch for these particular areas here to define them, because the areas are so small. Once I go in and I choose my color number 1 here, then the next step is for me to go in and choose what type of stitch that I want to use to fill these areas in. So here I'm just going to navigate up top. You have a choice to choose between your traditional digitizing tools versus your graphical digitizing tools here also. So it depends on what are you more comfortable with. For me, I'm going to start here with the column B stitch. The column B stitch here, once I select this, I want to make sure that I got my satin stitch here selected up top like this. And when I go in here this time, when I start digitizing this, I want to digitize this in this particular stitch angle here. Stitch angles are also very important. You need to know what area of the design that you're going to stitch the angles in like this. As I right click this and I draw As I trace this with his feet, like this, I'm going to press. And what I did here, I chose the column B stitch, but I digitized it like a Tommy stitch fill, which is incorrect. So I'm going to have to back off here. I'll press my backspace key. I'll take a different approach, and it's okay to change your mind. Here, I'll choose the complex turning for the satin stitches. Very small area, so when I go in and I'm digitizing this, I've got to tuck this underneath here also so it doesn't bleed out. Press enter. I'll press enter again. My entry point here, I can start here, and I want to exit right here. Once I exit, I want my stitch angle to be like this, 137 degrees. That's what this looks like. Again, this is going to be small. You might look at it now, you might say, well, it doesn't look right. Well, if I press my number 1 key, this is the finished size of the embroidery. Huge difference, right? So as I continue with this, I'm going to run. So I'll choose my running stitch here. I'll choose my run. I'll start where this one ended. Needle is still on the fabric here. I'll stop here, go enter. Now I'm also going to go back. I want to go back to the complex satin stitch that I did the first time. So in order to do this, I can press my space bar. Now, as I navigate, you see the running stitch here. While you're in the digitizing process, you can toggle between 2 stitch types. Once I press the space bar, watch what happens. It goes back automatically to the turning complex fill stitch. I'll start digitizing here like this, tracing this, right clicking. I'm going through here. Again, really, really tiny. So I don't have to try to get too much detail in it because it's so tiny. As I press enter, I'm going to press enter again into my entry point. And I'm going to enter my exit point. Here, I'll stop the exit point right here. This is my stitch angle here, 121 degrees. Looks like this. So I've got those taken care of. Now, think about this also. If I want to go in at this particular point here and I want to add the thumb area to this fill, and I want to keep this running, then that means that I can't leave my exit point right here unless I choose a running stitch and I run around the edge of it, which the black outline will also stitch that way. Or I'm going to go back to my reshape mode and I'll move that exit point to where it stops right here. What I don't like is for the exit point to be in the center of the fill stitch here like this, but here, because it's so tiny, and what I can also do here also is when I want to go in and I do, whether it's a complex fill stitch or a satin stitch, you can go into your dockers here and go into your special, here's your stitch type here, which is the complex turning. I can adjust the number of rows here that it overlaps, and I usually use 7. This means that if there's any overlapping lines, they're going to overlap by 7 lines, which means that there's not going to be any gap between anything because it's going to surely cover those up. Okay, here I'll go up top here. I'm going to click save. Click on my pick tool, and I'm going to go back to my running stitch. I'm going to keep this on the fabric like this. As I go through, and I'm looking at this thing, I'm like, I'll stop here. As I press enter, I'll press my space bar again. Again, goes directly back to my tatami turning stitch, and I'll start digitizing like this. And here I'm just left clicking because it's so tiny, nobody's going to even see that at all. Just like this. So I press enter again, because there's no hole in it. Starting point, exit point, and stitch angle like this. Enter. I want to do something different here. I want to go here now. I'm going to start digitizing this thumb. Again, this is the artist in me. Going through as I press enter again, and my starting point here, and my exit point here, and here's my stitch angle. And I can say, you know what? I don't like this. So I want to reverse this. I want to switch them. I want this one to stitch last. So you can change your mind. And not only did I change the stitching sequence here, I also have to go in and get that running stitch. I have to go back to my reshape mode like this and have to move that exit point here now because I changed it. And I can press my tab key to go in, and here's my starting point here, right on top of the exit point that's stitched last. And here's my exit point here. And I'm going to press tab, it starts stitching here now. And now I'm happier because now I can exit here, which eliminates that line in the center as I click save. It's all about the thinking process that when you go in and you're digitizing anything, you're absolutely correct. The stitch width is absolutely crucial. You have to know what the stitch lengths are in your design, or you're going to have a problem. Like for instance, right now, let's say that I've got my little ellipse tool here, and I'm going to do a satin stitch, and it's going to be small like this. And when I press enter, it's going to fill it just like this. But watch what happens when I try to digitize this at a larger size, like say this size, and I do this and press enter. You see what happened? Didn't fill it in, eh? But there's a reason because why it didn't fill it in with a satin stitch, because it's too wide for a satin fill stitch for this particular area. I can fix this in two different ways. I can either go into my object properties under my fills and do an auto split, or I can navigate and change this to a tatami stitch because the size is so much different than the original size here. Understanding and knowing what the stitch length is critical in embroidery, because otherwise you won't know what stitch type to use to put it anywhere that you want it to go actually. Very important here. I'm going to undo this. Get rid of this. Click save here. So those particular items there are done. So the next thing on my list now is to go in and I want to take care of the arm, take care of everything else here with that also. By doing this, I'm going to looking at this here. I want to measure the width of this area. I'll go to my view and I'll choose measure like this. And I measure this across like this. 15.3. The maximum width that I can go with a satin stitch without using the auto split, it's about 9, like this area here. Okay, so you make a decision on what type of stitch that you're going to use to fill that particular area in. I can use a tatami stitch for this area, or I can use a satin stitch that I can use the auto split with it also. However you want to go in and do it. So right now I'm going to change colors here to brown. My tail is going to stitch last in this particular area here. So I'll start here. Here I'll go back in and still use my turning tatami stitch here. This is a good stitch type to use here because it's very versatile. And I click here. This is so tiny, I can literally just do it whole and go back on it, but I'll just do it just for the sake of having to separate this section here. So here's my starting point here. I'm going to exit down here, and here are my stitch angles. I'll just use a single like this. Press my space bar, goes back here to my running stitch. Again, this area is so tiny. Goes here. I'm going to press S to hide the stitches. At this point now, I want to change this here. As I select this here like this. And if I move this down here, I can feel this little foot area here. Again, I'll go back here to my tatami. And I'll just start here for this. I'm also going to simplify this area here like this, because what I see here is overkill. As I press enter, enter, starting point here, exit point here, and I'm gonna use this stitch angle. And as I press S, this is what that looks like. Okay, next, I'm gonna press S to hide my stitches, and I'll start digitizing just like this. Right clicking on, because there are no straight lines here for this one, just like this. Starting point, exit point, stitch angle. And as I press S, this is what that looks like. And I'm going to save this also. I'll press my space bar to run. Again, keeping the needle on the fabric. I'll stop here as I press enter, press my space bar, press my S key to hide my stitches. And here, as I go through with this one, digitize these little feet here, or this little leg here. Starting point, exit point, and stitch angle, like this. As I press enter, and I'll press S to show you what it looks like. Anything can change. I can go in, go to my reshape mode. Anything can change. I can change the stitch angle for this. I can go in if I don't like that one. I can change it either now or I can change it later. Totally up to you as far as how you want to do that. Next here, we've got this area. I'm going to press S here. As I look at this, I'll do it this way. I'll choose my satin tatami. And I'll start here with this one. I'll go down like this. And I'm going to follow this outline, right clicking, just like this. I'll go all the way up to the top like this. And on this one, I'll just follow the outline down. As I press enter, enter again, here's my starting point here. Here's my exit point, stitch angle. I'm going to press S. This is what it looks like. I'm going to click save here. I'm always going to go in. I'm going to measure. I do this constantly. Go to view, measure. That's a wide stitch, but it's doable at this particular point because it's not longer than 9 millimeters. And I have a choice here whether I want to use this or I want to go in and use the auto split stitch like this. I can use that auto split stitch like this if I want to also. Again, it's totally up to you how you want this to work because this is an EMB file. You can always go in and you can change this thing later on. I can make this 8 by doing this, and it's going to shorten it like that. Okay, I'm going to click save here like this. So now when I go in, when I look at this object like this, go to my reshape mode. If I stop this right here, again, I want to make sure in my object properties here under specials that I do 7 rows here, overlap. Because I know the exit points here on this one, and I want to make sure that when it overlaps at 7 lines. Here, the tail end. Complex turning, I'll start here. And I'm just following my shape. Zoom in, right clicking here like this. When you're digitizing something like this also, you can always go in and you could adjust the width of something while you're digitizing. Like if I need to make this wider, I won't depend on Wilcom to do it for me. I'll just go in and I'll digitize. This is how I go in and do my column width, or I adjust for my pull compensation. I do it while I'm digitizing. That way, I'm leaning less on Wilcom to do it for me. Again, that's an experience type of thing. Let's go through like this. I continue. If you make a mistake, oops, press your backspace key. just like this. As I press enter again, here's my starting point here. I'm going to exit here. And now I'm going to turn these stitches. When you doing your stitch angles, you always do your stitch angles based on the numbers on a clock. They should always be the closest distance across like this, because that's going to ensure that when the light hits it, it's going to give you a very nice glow on the top of that stitch, just like this, like clockwork. Press enter, yes, that's what I'm looking at. I'm going to click save. So my little guy here kind of turning out to look pretty cool here for this. At the same time, now also I'm going to do a trim because I want to do the hand or the arm here, and the arm is separate. And like I told you before, when I go in and do this, I have to make that thicker. That means I have to go in and digitize it. Very thin. So you see what I'm doing here? I'm doing column width at the same time as I'm making this wider, just like this. Just like this. As I press enter, entry point here, exit point here, just like the numbers on the clock. Every time, just like this. Enter. S, this is what it looks like. At this time now, I have a choice here that I can go in and I can start digitizing the face area here, but for me, that would be a mistake at this time. Now I'm thinking about registration. Because of registration issues, I'm going to go in and have to go in and knock the outline on this out already. I'll do it right now and then continue with the head area. I could just continue with this and do the head area and then do the outline, and that might work. I'm going to click my pick tool and I'm just going to go in. I'm going to press S here to hide. You can see here just a basic simple outline. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to select everything like this. As I select this, I'm going to navigate over to my simple offset tool here like this, select this like that, and I want the spacing here to be at 0, not at 2. This is something that I did earlier. I want this to be at 0. Now at 0, I want to go in and I want to do a running stitch with this. I don't have any holes, but I'll just leave this on right now. And so I'm going to click OK here to confirm this. I'm going to go up to my object type and I'm going to choose color here for black for this. There's my outline for this. This outline here did okay as I look at this. Outlines, so I select this here. I'm noticing something here that's not right. This. That shouldn't look like that. It should be curved. The reason why it looks, and same thing here for this one. Whenever you see this, is an issue. And the issue is if you select it and go to the run in your object properties here, the stitch length here is fine, but what's not checked here is the variable run length. This variable run length actually works inside the software to whereas when you have a very sharp turn, let's say you have a stitch length here of 2 millimeters, if there's a sharp turn, the system automatically lessens the length of the stitch in order to create the curve like this. I'm going to click this, watch this. See that? This is without that variable run length on. This is with the variable, this is why that's important to have on. Next, I'm going to go in and I've got some areas here. I can press S to see where they are. I'm going to choose my running stitch, black, make that just like this, press enter. Got something right here, enter. You got my little thumb area here. Notice how I did this? Straight lines, much easier. This one here. Here, I'm gonna go across like that. Got an area here. Here, I'm gonna hide the visor. Here, I'm gonna also hide these stitches, and I wanna hide the vector image here also. Once I do this running stitch, I wanna choose the outline directly to do this running stitch with, like this. It's more important to do it this way as I get a closer view here to what that looks like. Just like this. This one, slightly inside the outline, because the pull comp is on and active. This. The tail area here with this one, I can choose the tail area. Now, I could also do this. I could click on the outline, and I'm gonna go into my edit tool. And I'm going to click on my knife. I'm gonna cut this right here. I'm gonna cut this right there. And I also wanna cut this area as I press enter. This means I can now go in and click this area that I just cut and press delete. And also I can delete this. Because I'm gonna click on the tail, go back here to my simple offset tool and add that outline around the tail just like this. See what happens? And I'm gonna click this and make sure, and I've been doing some experiments, that's why this thing is turned off here. Just like this. When you have areas like this on the bottom that are flat, you can do this. I'm gonna click on the original. I'm gonna go to my reshape mode like this. I'm gonna stop this here. I'm gonna move this node point out like this. And I'm gonna right click on it like this. I can make this bigger here also because this is a toe, yeah? And so with this, as I'm going in, I'm looking at this, making a toe here for this one. And if I wanna go in and make a change on any of these, I could just go in and move the node points out like this in order to create other toes that look like that. And that's totally up to you. I can delete this one. And I can click here and add a toe here, and click here, add a curve here for this one here also. So now I'm just going in and I'm increasing this, making these actually look like toes. It's totally up to you how you want to do this. You're in complete control as you're going in and as you're digitizing this item here. Now, I could also go in at this point here. Since I've adjusted the fill, I'm going to press S, and I'm going to hide the vector, and I'm going to click on this guy here. I'm going to go back to my reshape mode. Because I changed this, I can add node points here right down the center, right click here for a curve, and I can complement that just by going in and adding these areas just like this. And this is what you can do inside your software because you're controlling everything, because you're going in and you're doing the advanced stuff inside the software. That's what it looks like here for this one. And I can also, if I want to select the node points from here to here, I can click this node point, press my shift key down, and then click this one. It selects all of them, and then I can move them all out at the same time like this. And I'm going to click save. Once I've gone in, and once I've set up everything here, the next thing I'm going to do is this. I've gone in, I put in my running stitch. I'm going to click here, make sure that I got all of our vector items here. I'm going to scroll down here. Now we have the last thing we just finished were the running stitches, yeah? So I'm going to scroll down here. And here we have the running stitches. I'm going to move this down. I want to go in and I want to branch these stitches here now because we've gone in and digitized them, but now I want to branch. So I'm going to select color number 4 here, just like this. I want to go in now. I can right click on these items and I can choose branching, or I can press the I on the keypad and I'm going to click branching. Immediately on the lower left side of my screen here, it's asking me now for an entry point. It wants to know where I want to start stitching this. I'm going to start right here. I'm going to start here on this line, and I'm also going to exit here because I want the sewing machine to do a double run stitch on this. I don't want some areas to stitch once and some areas to stitch twice. I want everything to stitch 2 times. I'm going to left click, watch my color object list, exit point. Went from, now I've got just one object here. Okay, and I'm going to save this. So I've got the outline for that complete. It's doing a double run stitch totally on everything. So now the next step now is to go in and start the head area for this. This is one of these designs. It looks like it's so easy to do, but it's actually a pain when you look at it because of what you have to go in and do in preparation to get this to work. It looks beautiful once you get finished with it, but at this particular point here now, the next step is to go in and choose the teeth. I'm going to select color number 5 here like this. I'm going to use the tatami stitch here with the complex fill, not the turning strokes this time, but the tatami stitch for this one. So this one, when I click this here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start digitizing, overlapping, just like this. And this area is going to be so tiny once it stitches out. Once I press enter, enter again, my stitch angle looks like that. But I want to make this a tatami stitch, so I'll choose my pick tool and I'm going to change this to tatami like this. With my tatami stitch settings, I want to go in, and as I navigate to my object properties here with this, my stitch spacing, because it's so tiny here, for normally I'll do 0.38 for the spacing for this, and for the length I'm going to do 3.8. I'd like to change this offset fraction here. I'll use 33 and 33. It just gives it a different look here with that. And I'm going to click save. So the teeth area now have been done. And I also want to make sure also that when you go in, would you select this here and go into your underlay stitches, I want to make sure that for my tatami stitch that I've got first one by shape edge run, I can use two millimeters here for the length of that because it's so tiny. And for the secondary underlay stitch, because it's a tatami stitch fill, it must be at least a tatami or a double tatami stitch for this actually. And just making sure that I got the correct underlay settings. I know I can go back in and do the rest of them here a little bit later, but right now I just want to make sure that I got that in place. So the teeth are done now, okay? So right now, what's next? Let's go through this. Looking at this piece here, you have these areas here, you have the ear here with this. So this could be kind of tricky sometimes as you go through and as you're looking to see how you're going to go in and do something like this. I'm going to start here with the lips and go up. And so I'm going to choose color number 1, and I'll choose my tatami turning strokes here again. I'll start here. And as I'm going through this situation here, as I'm looking at this, and I'm digitizing. When I'm doing this, I'm going to stop this right here and overlap this and here as I go in. Starting point here, exit point here. Again, my stitch angles. I'm going to press enter. This is what that looks like. I'm going to run. Got my ear here. Make sure I got the correct stitch type here selected. I'm going to run. As I digitize like this, making sure everything is being overlapped. That's necessary for this. As I press my entry point and my exit point, here's my stitch angle. And this is what that looks like. I'm going to choose a running stitch. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go back here to that tatami, satin, overlap just like this. Entry point, exit point, and stitch angle, just like this. And I think for this area here, I think I want to use I'm going to run. I'm going to run down here for this one. I'll do this separately. As I overlap this, starting point, exit point, and stitch angle. And this is what that looks like as I press save. I'm going to run. This is what that looks like. I want to go here now. And as I look at this, one thing to consider here is the area, the facial area here. You got stitches that are going to stitch on top of it. That's one thing to consider for this. So right now I'm going to press M. I'm going to measure. I'm going to do a tatami stitch here. Just going to go in and I'm going to try this and see how that works for this. Starting point, exit point here. This is my stitch angle. Here I'll select and I'll choose my tatami. And you see what happens with something like this. I've got these areas here, right? You got these areas here that I chose to do a satin stitch with like this. Now you start thinking about, well, is this going to work best for the machine? And I say no. So I'm going to change my mind again. I'm going to delete this. And it's okay to go in and change your mind. I'll go in, I'll choose I'm going to do them all like this. Again, this thing is so small and you really have to make sure that everything is working correctly. And there's always another way to do it. Like this, and here, and here. So press enter. Starting point, exit point. It looks like this. If I make this a satin stitch, one option I have too is I can do the auto split. And again, it depends on how you want this to look. That might not be the best option for that. So here I'll go in and I'll change this back here to the tatami stitches. And I'm going to click save. I want to go in here also, and I want to do something different here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose my satin here, and I'll do something like this. Again, this is just me being an artist. With this, so press enter, entry point, exit point. This is what that looks like. And here for this one, well, here again, watch this. When I click this, I'll do this one first. I'm going to do his nose, and I'm going to do his nose in a satin stitch. So this is actually a satin stitch that's stitching on top of a tatami stitch. Here, exit point here. I'll change the stitch angles, and this is what it looks like. Then I'll do this guy. Entry point, exit point, and stitch angle, just like this. And this is what that looks like. I'm going to click save here. As you go in there, sometimes when you're working and you're looking at these things like that, you can definitely go in and you can make changes. You can make adjustments as you're working inside the software. Like right now here for the color number 2 here, when I go in, now this one here, I can choose the turning satin stroke like this for the satin stitch. And I'll go in just like this, right on the line. And I've got to make this easier. So I can't use all of these. So what I'm going to end up doing is using a portion of them as I go in, just like this, as I press enter, entry point, and my exit point here, stitch angles. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying to myself, I can use the auto split for this. So press enter, what that looks like. I can click these items here. This should be a point. So I'll click this and press spacebar to see what happens here. So now when I'm looking at this, I can go into my fills. I can do an auto split to see what happens here. It's not long enough. I can change this to 6 millimeters and see if that'll make a difference, but it won't. So it's not even a need to use the auto split with this at all. The stitches are not long enough to do that with it as I click save. So right now, as I'm looking at this, I have a little face area up here. This is what it looks like. When I select my fill, I choose where that exit point is going to be at. As I go through with this, for the settings for this, if I want to use the same settings for this white fill as for this one, very simple to do. I right click on this guy. I'm going to make the properties current. I'm going to select this guy. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to apply. I'll just need to go in and change the stitch angle, but the settings themselves are the same. I'm going to click save up top like this. As I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, now I can go in here and I could do the white area here. I'll choose this tatami way of stitching the satin stitches is very useful. And I really like it. That gives you an edge, because as far as having to go in and think about the angles and things like this, you're actually going in and you have the ability here now to go in and just do these fill stitches like this, and you can turn the corners, and these need to be white like this. We've got the face area here now for our little guy. Everything else here looks like go here with this. I do want to go in, so select this here and move this over. Satin stitches, satin stitches. I'm just going to go in. I'm going to select everything that I just did. I'm going to navigate here to my pick tool. I'll choose my polygon select. The polygon select allows you to go in and just select specific areas because you can control what's being selected, like you have here like this, as I press enter. And I'll navigate here to the simple offset tool again. This should be at 0. For my spacing, I want to use a running stitch. I'm going to click OK like this. I'll navigate to my pick tool and change that color to black, making sure again here that my variable run is turned on. As I click save, once I digitize this, I can go in with my running stitch and just digitize this. Just like this. This goes up. And this is black. So once I select that and change my color, for this one, same thing. Slightly inside when you're digitizing like this, not directly on the line, slightly to the inside. Here I can also go in and do this. It's up to you. If you want to go in and do the teeth differently, it's totally up to you how you do that. I'm just right now at this particular point here, I want to have this simple. It's going to be so tiny and I don't want to have any issues. Click the nose, simple offset tool. Eyes here. So I select here, making sure that the variable run is turned on here again here. And with these, I just go in and just manually digitize these, just like this. It's easy just to manually do it. Here also. Press S here. Just like this. Just like that. This area here, just going to go in and just digitize just like this, slightly to the inside. So I press enter. This one, I'm going to make sure. For this one here, I'm going to go in and choose the reshape mode. Okay, got the outline here for the nose set. At this point now, let me see, was there anything else? We can add. The next step is again now to go in to the color object list, select all the black, navigate here or right click on this area and choose branching and set up your starting point and your exit point. I'm going to click save here like this. At this point now, as we're going through this, we're going to go in now and we're going to run this. We just want to see how the machine is going to stitch this out. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to choose the stitch player and let's run this out. The areas where there are no underlay stitches are where I have to go in and add underlay stitches. But at this particular point here, the most critical thing for me is making sure that the stitches are in the right location on the design. Okay, I can always go back in, I can add the underlay stitches later, but making sure that the stitches are in the right location is imperative for the production on the embroidery machine and for how fast this design runs on the embroidery machine. All that stuff is going to come into play actually. So when you go in and we're looking at this type of advanced digitizing, this is what we have to do in situations like this. And this is what your skill level, as you continue to work inside the software, will increase. With the training and everything, if you're not there already, you will get there. But it's a process as it goes through. And watching this stitch and then watching it run on the embroidery machine is priceless. I have a question for the visor. Shouldn't you still digitize it from the bottom up and center out? In a perfect world, yes, you can do that. But sometimes that's going to work more so with lettering. But with something like this is a different animal here with this. And you can go in and you could try to digitize this from top to bottom and left to right. But in some situations, it's not the thing to do for me actually, because I'm looking at results. It's better to do it based on the type of design that you're looking to stitch out, is what I would say for that. In some areas, it's definitely better to stitch it from the bottom to the top and center out, but you're not going to always have that option to do that with based on the layout of the design. And every layout is going to be different actually, as we know that already with the designs. So for something like this, all I got to do is go in, add my underlay stitches to this, and I'll be done with this. 3,975 stitches in it currently. As you go inside the software, every design is different. Every design is different. And depending on, you can always go back and change things. If you don't like something, you can go back and you can adjust it and change it as long as you have that EMB file. But this is our project for today, guys. Do I have any other questions? We did go a little bit over today, but we had a lot to discuss. Any more questions for me? Guys, thank you so much for your kind words. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. We ask that you visit us at the willcommamerica.com as well as willcom.com for tons of documentation, downloads, and things like that. Stay safe out there. As always, happy digitizing. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.